Welcome back to another reading and correcting of Stepping Up by me, Kindar, the Tigers. Today we are doing chapter 22. Jekyll looked over the team of people Tibs brought to the fighters training field. Thought you said we'd train a team. I count none of them. They're Omegas, Tib replied. Team's kinda loose. Team's kinda loose back then, remember? It had started with a friend of Fedora's, the archer, that made her blush, asking if Tibs could get this could guess this team? No, get his team's archer to give her pointers. Then an Omega fighters at the table next to theirs had asked for help too. And then a sorcerer had seen them talking, and soon, well, Tibs had hurried to leave before every surviving Omega in the inn was at the table. Still been surprised when there had only been 8 of them, including Fedora, here this morning. The way people were talking, you'd expected them to tell everyone his team had agreed to train them, which would have pulled in even more people. And you want us to train them? Jekyll's tone was neutral. No excitement or noise. He'd been all for it when Tibs had proposed it. Now, looking at them, it was gone. Are we even allowed to do that? Mez asked. Once Jekyll had agreed, he'd sent a message to the archer and where to join them. By his expression, this wasn't what he'd expected their team activity to be. The rules say we can't talk about the dungeon, Karina said. Her study of the assembled runners was more cordial. She hadn't been overjoyed at the proposition, but she was willing to help. There's nothing there preventing us from helping the new arrivals. I believe, Kandar said, that is because new conscripts are not usually... Oh, right. That is because... That I believe, Kandar said, that is because new conscript are not usual after the initial group. There is an expectation that those who come after, since they must pay to do so, have received all the training they need for the level they wish to take on. Jekyll grinned. Well then, if it ain't in the rules, we can't be breaking them. Once Knuckles hears about this, once Knuckles hears we're doing this, we'll probably change the rules, so we can't. But until then, we might as well make the best of it. He looked them over. Okay, so, which one of you are the fighters? He went to Tibs and whispered. It would be easier to tell them apart. The 2 girls and a guy stepped forward. The guy, the fighter who'd insisted Fedora and the archer be on his team, was bouncing in place with excitement. If you fight with swords, go get them and join me. I looked around and pointed to a vacant area over there. The guy was back from the box with the sword, having taken the first one he pulled out and talking with Jekyll as they walked. He motioned excitedly, nearly stabbing Jekyll with it. The girls were slower to get moving, and they took their time testing the swords before heading to where Jekyll was waiting. Mez sighed. Archers? The guy stepped forward along with Fedora's friend. Mez looked at Tibs, annoyed, then back to the 2 of them. Come on, I can't train you here. We're heading to the archery field. You can tell me what kind of training you've received. For someone claiming nobles were about helping people, Mez wasn't particularly enthusiastic. Rena pointed to the 2 guys. You and you are the sorcerers. He nodded, surprised. Not sure how much practice you'll be able to get in without an amulet of your own, but we can cover theory so that she stopped looking at the 2 amulets Tibs offered her. Why did you get that? She asked suspiciously. They're a loan from Darren. I have a few more. Once it was clear I could limit who would got more than I thought I'd need. Do I want to know where he got them? Tibs shrugged. He's a merchant. I expect he bought them off someone. That was true enough. Now, where that someone might have gotten them? Tibs didn't want to hazard a guess. He hadn't heard of any rogue getting caught stealing. But Darren said that more than once he'd be willing to buy anything Tibs found lying around on his nocturnal walk. He'd ask about thieves operating in his town, but the merchant had become apologetic about having no idea who might be doing what. Tibs didn't believe him, but respected that he wouldn't divulge what he knew. Irina looked as convinced about how legal their acquisitions were as Tibs felt, but finally shrugged. I'll take 2 more. Those starter amulet don't have much in the way of reserve, and I have no idea how they're recharged. He handed her the amulets and left Tibs with Fedora, along with the guy who Tibs wished found himself someone else to train him. At least, When Tibs leveled his gaze on him this time, the rogue blushed instead of making lewd remarks. So, Fedora said, are you going to have to us walk to the crowd picking pocket that's training you until we're caught? She hadn't quite forgiven him for catching her. The guy looked at Tibs, worried. Tibs took a knife, shaking his head as he looked at it. Not this time. This time, I'm going to focus on helping you stay alive in the dungeon. And that starts with one of these. He raised the knife. Don't bother with them. Get yourself a sword. I don't care what the teachers tell you about rogues needing knives. These things aren't useful unless a guy moved faster than Tibs could react and snatched the knife out of his hand. With a flick, it was flying, lodging itself in a box holding swords. Tibs looked at it, in the exact center of it, as far as he could tell. Tibs doubted at this distance he'd even hit the box. The guy's smugness vanished as Tibs leveled his gaze on him. Let me catch you stealing from me again, and it will cost you something. He paused. Not your hand, you need that, but there are other parts you can do with it. Fedora snickered, and Tibs tried to glare at her, but the guy's terrified expression, how his hand almost covered his crotch, made it hard. Tibs hadn't even considered targeting that. You can keep using knives if you want, he told the guy. Just remember that those you buy will be eaten by the dungeon after you throw them, unless they are made to resist that. Go to the Sword and Shield, tell Darana sent you. He'll sell the right kind. He sells the right kind for that. Tibs looked around. Let's go to the rogue field. I can see how. Go. How good. I can see how good you are with traps. While me and Fedora get in some knife fighting in. Get some nice fighting in. Since as much as I hate the things, it's all I know how to use for now. I'm a horrible teacher, Pickle said, then dug heartily into his meal. Perhaps you should teach them to fight with their fists, Comdar commented, instead of attempting. Show them how to use a sword. Pickle shook his head, chewing. Can't. None of them ever fought in the pits. Without that, they need an element for protection to survive. Even if all they do with the sword is swing wildly, that's going to increase their chance of surviving. Keep on. Okay. I'm not that of a teacher. Where are the archers? Asked Mez, who again looked annoyed. Horrible. I have no idea why they picked the bow. Neither ever touched one before coming here. Surprised they survived their previous runs. Seems like anyone without training would be dying. Range, Jekyll said between bites. Between bites, Dents continued. Anyone smart stays as far from their enemy as they can. Tibs joined the others in staring at the fighter, who was back to eating as if he hadn't said anything. What? Jekyll finally asked, looking at them, trying not to grin. You guys know I'm not smart. How were your student? Trina asked Tibs after rolling her eyes at the fighter. Tibs sighed. The guy's asking to be eaten by the dungeon. He thinks that if I'm his special guy, that's going to keep him alive in the dungeon. Yeah. You know what? I don't need him in the dungeon. The guy's asking to be eaten by the dungeon. Thinking if I'm his special guy, that's going to keep him alive. It might, Nez said under his breath. You have something to say? Jekyll demanded. The other shook his head. Sorry. Been having a few bad days. Someone stole Amanda's family portrait. She's been demanding I do something about you. I didn't take it. Tibs protested. I know. As rubbed his face, it isn't it's the one thing she considers a value she brought. Unlike what you think, Tibs, she doesn't care about riches. She had it painted before we left as something to remind her of what we'd go back to once this is done. Why didn't you come to us? Pickle asked. And what would you have done? Ness snapped inside. He downed his tankard and motioned for another. You aren't the law. I went to Hard Knuckles, but never got to talk with him. I'm not important enough. Tibs sank in his seat, even if the accusation wasn't directed. Another one slips through. Naz thanked the server. She isn't the only one to have lost something. Someone seems to be going through to every noble's house, taking something especially significant to them. Not valuable in money, but sentiment. They are getting angry, said Stinkard. But that is my problem, and I shouldn't let that affect how I behave. I apologize, Tibs. Tibs forgot his embarrassment at the hint he was getting special treatment. Harry hadn't said that was hadn't said Harry hadn't said what was taken wasn't worth Harry hadn't said what was taken wasn't worth much in coin. Harry hadn't said what was taken. Harry hadn't said what was taken was. Harry hadn't said. My reflex is to say mention, but this is Tibs, so I'm even if it's narration, I'm a little and said anything about value of what was taken. Let's try this. Harry hadn't said anything about the value of what had about the value of what was taken. Come here. And Tibbs had expected it to be coins. The only reason Tibbs could think for someone to take items people were emotionally attached to was to steer trouble. If they were targeting nobles, they were looking to stir up a really big. What? Tibbs asked, looking at the village watching him. Jackal said, trying not to grin. What are you going to do now that you have a special guy? He stared at him. Feed him to the dungeon right after I talked to Krosef about doing the same to you. How about your friend, Fedora? Trina asked over Jackal's laughter. She'll do better. She's angry at me right now, but that makes her work harder at proving she can do better than what I think. She's okay with traps and better than me with throwing knives. There at Miz chuckled. He choked on his ale. Didn't say anything. The archer said between cough, but then he was also fighting not to laugh. Fine. Because I mean, every rogue's better than me at that. Still, I think she'll get to pick her elements. Can you tell when someone's ready? You're gonna ask. Tip shook his head and lowered his voice. I can tell their element is stronger than people who aren't runner, but I haven't no, it's not their element here. It's the essence. I can tell their essence is stronger than people who aren't runners, but I haven't noticed anything different in those. We were taking those who were taken to the guild. Have there been a lot of them? People ask. Can't think of anyone I've seen among the Omega fighters making it, but they're fighters. We do tend to die a lot. I know of 2 sorcerers, Trina said, but you're right. This groom seems ill prepared. It is possible that this is happening too fast, as I have. It is possible this is happening fast. As I have mentioned, there had not been a need to bring in new conscript to a dungeon after the first group. As kingdoms want to gain favor with the guild, they will continue sending conscripts if requested, but they may be rounding less experienced criminals, therefore less likely to survive. And they are bringing in more, he said. I suspect it will do little good. You speak as if you've seen a lot of dungeons, I said. Are they all as deadly as this one? I have been to dungeon towns, Dark corrected, but I have never investigated the level of deadliness. I have never investigated the level of deadliness of dungeons. I was mostly busy remaining inconspicuous while finding ways to train. Didn't you just walk into this one? Kirina asked. I mean, walk into the town, not the dungeon. Commodore was slow in responding, and Tibs thought he was picking what would be true from what wouldn't. I did not have the funds to. That was paid for me, both the passage through the platform and my admission as a runner. And what's your price? Jekyll asked. No one gives away something like this, and you said back then you also hadn't been given a choice. I was given one, the cleric said. Do this or die isn't much of a choice as far as I'm concerned. Condor nodded. I do not know what they expect of me. I suspect they wished me to die while they could say they had nothing to do with it. The situation regarding finding me was precarious. They watched him, waiting for more, but Commodore went back to eating. When he spoke, it was to ask, how are the sorcerers? Karina gave him an annoyed glare before answering. Chum Sang has the knack for it. He's more efficient when he pulls the energy out of the animal. Does that translate to being a better sorcerer? Liz asked. I don't know, she answered, and Tibs stopped paying attention. The thief needed to be stopped and fast. It meant he couldn't do this alone. Couldn't ask his team for help. They'd be willing, but he needed rogues to fight this thief since they were able to stay out of Harry's grasp. Oof, I need to breathe. They'd be willing, but he needed rogues to fight this thief since they were able, since they were good enough to stay out of Harry's grasp. And this concludes the read and correcting of Stepping Up, Chapter 22. If you are enjoying this, please hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell if you want to know when the next one's going to be up. Share with your friends. You never know, you might like this. If you want to read more of the story, previous one, or if you're catching up the chapters ahead, you can read that for free on Royal Road. If you want to support me and read further ahead or other stories I have written, you can do that on my Patreon. And if you want to catch me doing this live, I do that on Twitch, as well as write my stories. And you can see it, and all the links are in the notes. And with that, I shall wish you a good day.